The digital planetary library had existed for over a millennium, safeguarding the most comprehensive archives of cosmic predatory species ever assembled. Its vast crystalline databases contained meticulous records of every known apex predator that had threatened galactic civilizations since humanity first ventured beyond their solar system. Within the library's hallowed chambers, beneath shimmering holographic projections of extinct monstrosities, a single file consistently drew the most attention and invoked the most dread: the Void Reaper. Dr. Mara Lin stood before the holographic display, her dark eyes reflecting the shifting images of destruction that played before her. 2 centuries had passed since the last confirmed sighting of a Void Reaper. 2 centuries of silence had allowed galaxies to breathe again, to rebuild and flourish. As the leading cosmic ecologist of her generation, Mara had spent her career studying predatory species, but the Void Reaper had always been more legend than science to her generation, a boogeyman of space. Used to frighten cadets in the Interstellar Academy. "Access file VR Alpha Prime," she commanded, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her stomach. The library's AI complied instantly, unfurling a storm of data around her. Statistics, biological analyses, and devastation reports swirled in the air, painting a picture of an organism that defied conventional classification. The Void Reaper had once terrorized entire star systems. Its massive form, larger than most interstellar vessels, possessed an uncanny ability to travel through space without technology, adapting to any environment it encountered. Its hunger was legendary. Entire colonies had disappeared overnight, leaving nothing but molecular residue. The last documented attacks had targeted the most advanced civilizations of the time, as though the creature possessed an intelligence that recognized threats. And then, without explanation, they had vanished. Mara's research team had been studying this disappearance for years, developing theories ranging from mass extinction to evolutionary adaptation. None had proven satisfactory. "Dr. Lin," a voice called from behind her. Mara turned to see Director Kasim approaching, his normally composed features tightened with concern. "The Council has received a report that requires your immediate attention." He handed her a data crystal, and as she inserted it into her reader, Mara felt her heart skip a beat. The biosignal was unmistakable, quantum fluctuations that only a Void Reaper's unique cellular structure could produce. The signal originated from the Solara system, specifically from a pre-industrial planet that had been designated as a protected developmental zone, a primitive world where advanced technology was forbidden, allowing its indigenous civilization to progress naturally. "This can't be right," Mara whispered, more to herself than to the director. "The signature is too small, too localized. Nevertheless, the Council wants you to investigate." Director Kasim replied, "They're concerned about potential contact with the indigenous population. If a Void Reaper has somehow found its way to a developing world—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications were clear. It would be a cosmic-level extinction event for a civilization that had barely discovered electricity. Mara closed the holographic display with a gesture. "When do I leave?" "Immediately. You'll be provided with minimal detection equipment to avoid cultural contamination. This is strictly an observation mission. Dr. Lin, if the signature is confirmed, the Council will decide the next steps." As Director Kasim turned to leave, Mara called after him, "Director, what if the readings are accurate, but there's something we're missing? What if the Void Reaper has changed?" The director paused. "The Council's orders are explicit. You observe and report, nothing more." After he departed, Mara stared at the data crystal in her palm, the weight of billions of lives feeling heavy in her hand. The protocol was clear. protect the developing world from both the predator and knowledge that could alter their natural development. But the scientist in her whispered that this might be the only opportunity to study a living Void Reaper. To understand what had happened to these cosmic terrors, she would have to decide which voice to listen to once she reached Solara. The journey to the Solara system took 3 standard days in hyperspace transit. Mara used the time to review everything known about Void Reapers, searching for any clue that might explain the anomalous readings. By the time her small research vessel entered orbit around the target planet, locally known as Terrace, she had memorized every documented encounter, every theoretical weakness, every failed attempt at communication. None of it prepared her for what awaited below. From orbit, Terrace appeared deceptively peaceful, a world of sweeping continents, vast oceans, and swirling cloud formations. The biosignature emanated from a small village nestled between a dense forest and rolling hills in the northern hemisphere. According to the Cultural Assessment Team's latest report, the civilization was roughly equivalent to Earth's early 19th century, steam power beginning to replace manual labor, telescopes revealing the nature of their solar system, the first theories of evolution taking shape in academic circles. Mara's landing craft, disguised to appear as a natural meteorological phenomenon, descended through the atmosphere as night fell across the continent. She had chosen traditional local attire from the ship's cultural database, a simple dress with a warm overcoat that marked her as a traveler from a neighboring region. Her detection equipment had been miniaturized and concealed within what appeared to be antique scientific instruments, a brass telescope, a weather gauge, a compass with hidden quantum sensors. The craft landed in a clearing several kilometers from the village. After ensuring her appearance was appropriate, Mara set out on foot, her heart pounding with equal measures of scientific excitement and primal fear. The forest was dense, filled with unfamiliar sounds and movements that set her nerves on edge. Each crack of a branch, each rustle of leaves made her imagine the legendary predator lurking in the darkness, ready to consume her in an instant. By midnight, she reached the outskirts of the village. Quaint stone and timber houses with thatched roofs lined unpaved streets. Most windows were dark, though a few still showed the warm glow of candlelight or oil lamps. The biosignal detector hidden in her compass vibrated subtly against her palm, confirming that somewhere in this peaceful settlement, a creature that had once devoured star systems was present. But the reading was still inexplicably small. Mara had planned to begin her investigation at dawn, posing as a natural philosopher studying the region's wildlife. Now, standing at the edge of the sleeping village, uncertainty gripped her. Protocol dictated she should set up observation posts, collect data remotely, and minimize interaction with the locals. A flash of movement caught her eye. Something large darted between 2 buildings at the far end of the village. Without thinking, Mara followed, keeping to the shadows. The movement had been too swift, too fluid to be human. As she rounded a corner, she caught a glimpse of something impossible, a massive paw print in the soft earth, easily the size of her head. The tracks led toward a small cottage set apart from the others, surrounded by a well-tended garden. Unlike the other houses, a lamp still burned brightly in the window. As Mara approached cautiously, the door opened, spilling warm light onto the path. An elderly woman appeared, her silver hair gleaming in the lamplight. "I know you're out there, stranger," the woman called out in a surprisingly strong voice. "If you're following my cat, you might as well come inside where it's warm." Mara froze, uncertain how to proceed. Her mission parameters hadn't prepared her for direct confrontation so quickly. After a moment's hesitation, she stepped into the light. "Forgive my intrusion," she said, adopting the local dialect she had studied during the journey. "I'm a traveler, just arrived. I thought I saw something unusual." The old woman studied her with keen eyes that seemed to cut through pretense. "Did you now? Well, unusual things often find their way to my door." She gestured toward the cottage. "I'm Leora. Come in before you catch your death in the night chill." Every instinct told Mara to decline, to retreat and regroup, but the biosignal detector was now pulsing more rapidly, indicating proximity to the source. Swallowing her apprehension, she followed Leora into the cottage. The interior was surprisingly spacious, filled with an eclectic collection of objects that spoke of a lifetime of curiosity. Dried herbs hung from ceiling beams, botanical drawings covered the walls, and shelves groaned under the weight of rocks, fossils, and bound journals. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the room. "You have the look of a scholar about you," Leora observed, gesturing for Mara to sit in a worn armchair near the fire. Not many women in these parts travel alone with scientific instruments. Mara's hand instinctively went to the disguised equipment at her belt. "You're very observant. When you've lived as long as I have, observation becomes second nature." Leora busied herself preparing tea in a cast-iron kettle. "So, what brings a woman of science to our humble village? We're rather off the common roads." "I'm researching regional wildlife," Mara replied, the practiced lie coming easily. "I've heard reports of unusual creatures in these forests." Leora's hands paused momentarily in their work. "Have you indeed? And what sort of creatures might interest a scholar such as yourself?" Before Mara could answer, a loud thump came from the cottage's rear, followed by a scratching at the back door. Leora smiled, a secretive expression that made the fine wrinkles around her eyes deepen. "Ah, speaking of unusual creatures," she said, moving to open the door. "Here's my midnight wanderer returning home." The door swung open, and Mara's blood froze in her veins. Entering the cottage with casual grace was a cat, but unlike any cat she had ever seen. It stood nearly a meter tall at the shoulder, with a body easily the size of a large tiger. Its fur was the deepest black Mara had ever beheld, seeming to absorb rather than reflect the firelight. But most striking were its eyes, vertical pupils set in irises that shifted color like oil on water, displaying hues that shouldn't exist in nature. The quantum fluctuation detector in Mara's pocket was now vibrating so intensely it threatened to break apart. There was no mistake. This cat was the source of the Void Reaper biosignature. Mara rose instinctively, nearly overturning her chair as she backed away. The creature regarded her with those impossible eyes, its tail swishing slowly as it assessed the stranger in its territory. "Don't mind Midnight," Leora said hamly, as though having a creature of cosmic horror as a pet was the most natural thing in the world. "He's particular about new people, but he won't harm you unless I tell him to." The casual threat, delivered with a grandmotherly smile, was not lost on Mara. She forced herself to breathe, to think past the paralyzing fear. This was impossible. Void Reapers were city-sized entities that consumed everything in their path. They didn't become house pets that answered to the name Midnight. That's no ordinary cat," Mara managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Leora laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a summer breeze. "My dear, nothing in this world is ordinary if you look closely enough." She scratched behind the massive cat's ears, and to Mara's astonishment, the creature leaned into the touch, producing a rumbling purr that vibrated the floorboards. "Midnight found me during the great storm 2 winters past, half-starved and injured. He was no bigger than a normal kitten then." Mara's scientific mind raced to process this information. A juvenile Void Reaper, one that had somehow been reduced in size, or perhaps an entirely new evolutionary branch. The implications were staggering. May I? Mara hesitated, scarcely believing what she was about to ask. May I observe him more closely? As a scholar of natural philosophy, I've never encountered such a magnificent feline. Leora's expression turned protective. Midnight decides who may approach him, but you're welcome to try, if you're brave enough. Gathering her courage, Mara slowly knelt on the floor, making herself smaller and less threatening. The creature, she couldn't bring herself to think of it as merely a cat, watched her with unblinking alien eyes. Carefully, she extended her hand, palm down, fingers relaxed. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with fluid grace that belied its size, the creature approached. It sniffed her hand, and Mara felt a strange tingling sensation where its breath touched her skin. A memory surfaced unbidden, something from the ancient records about Void Reapers being able to analyze cellular structure through respiration. Then, to her shock, the creature pushed its massive head against her palm, a quintessentially feline gesture of acceptance. Well, Leora said, sounding genuinely surprised, he doesn't take to strangers often. You must have a gentle soul beneath that scholarly exterior. Mara could scarcely breathe as she felt the impossible softness of the creature's fur. Everything she knew about Void Reapers, their mindless destructiveness, their insatiable hunger, their immunity to all attempts at communication, crumbled in the face of this reality. "How long have you had him?" she asked, struggling to maintain her cover while her mind reeled with scientific implications. "As I said, 2 winters now. He grows faster than any cat should," Leora replied, moving to pour the tea that had been steeping. "The villagers thought me mad for taking in such a strange creature, but they've grown used to him. Some even bring him treats now, though few are brave enough to pet him as you're doing." Mara spent the next hour asking carefully phrased questions, piecing together the creature's history in this village while trying not to reveal her true purpose. According to Leora, Midnight had appeared during a particularly violent storm, a tiny kitten seemingly orphaned and alone. His unusual eyes and rapid growth had initially concerned the old woman, but his affectionate nature and protective behavior had won her over. "He keeps the vermin away, and no wild predators dare approach the village anymore," Leora explained with pride. "Last autumn, he even saved a child who had wandered too close to the river, dragged the boy back by his collar, gentle as could be." The cognitive dissonance was almost too much for Mara to process. Everything in the historical record indicated that Void Reapers were mindless destruction machines, consuming all organic matter in their path. Yet here was one, domesticated and protective, living peacefully among a pre-industrial society. As the night grew late, Leora offered Mara lodging, which she gratefully accepted. The chance to observe the creature longer was too valuable to pass up. As she settled onto a small cot in Leora's spare room, the massive cat curled up on a rug near the fire. Mara's mind whirled with questions and theories. She needed to report to the council, but what would she tell them? That the most feared predator in galactic history now spent its days catching mice and rescuing children? That it purred when scratched behind the ears? The council would likely order immediate containment or elimination, regardless of the creature's apparently reformed nature. But was that the right course of action? If Void Reapers could change, could be tamed or evolve into something symbiotic rather than destructive, the scientific and ethical implications were enormous. As sleep finally claimed her, Mara decided to delay her report. She needed more data, more observation, She needed to understand what had happened to transform a cosmic horror into a beloved pet. She had no idea that the following day would bring a storm that would force her to confront both the creature and her own preconceptions in ways she could never have anticipated. Dawn broke, with ominous gray clouds gathering on the horizon. Mara awoke to find Leora already busy with morning chores. While the creature, she still couldn't bring herself to call it midnight, watched her with those unsettling, color-shifting eyes from its position by the hearth. "We're in for weather," Leora announced, looking out the window at the darkening sky. "Bad storm coming. You might want to delay your travels, young scholar." Mara nodded, secretly relieved at the excuse to extend her observation. "If you don't mind the imposition, I'd be grateful to stay until it passes." "No imposition at all. It gets lonely out here sometimes, despite my feline companion." Leora began gathering extra firewood from a stack beside the door. "Make yourself useful and help me prepare. Storms in these parts can last for days." The morning passed in a flurry of activity, securing shutters, bringing in additional supplies from the garden, reinforcing the door. Throughout it all, the creature followed Leora like a shadow, occasionally carrying items in its mouth with surprising gentleness. Once, when Leora stumbled slightly under the weight of a water bucket, the massive cat actually steadied her with its body, showing an awareness that went far beyond animal instinct. By midday, the wind had picked up considerably, bending the trees and howling around the eaves of the cottage. The first heavy raindrops began to fall as they finished their preparations, quickly becoming a deluge that transformed the garden into a muddy swamp. Safely inside, Mara helped Leora prepare a simple meal of root vegetables and preserved meat. As they worked, she carefully steered the conversation toward the creature. "Midnight seems unusually intelligent," she observed, watching as the cat settled itself by the fire, eyes half closed but still tracking their movements. Leora nodded, a fond smile playing across her weathered features. "More than intelligent. Sometimes I swear he understands every word I say. And there are moments when I look into his eyes and see something else, something ancient." Mara's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" The old woman was quiet for a moment, stirring the pot of stew thoughtfully. "It's difficult to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it, but sometimes, when he looks at me, I feel like I'm being seen by something that has witnessed the birth and death of stars, something that knows secrets no human was meant to know." She laughed suddenly, breaking the somber mood. "Listen to me, rambling like the village mystic. My neighbors already think I'm half mad for keeping such an unusual pet." "I don't think you're mad at all," Mara said quietly. "I think you're more perceptive than most." As the day progressed, the storm intensified. Thunder crashed overhead, shaking the sturdy cottage to its foundations. The creature grew increasingly agitated, pacing back and forth before the door, its tail lashing with obvious distress. "He hates storms," Leora explained, watching her pet with concern. "Ironic, considering I found him during the worst tempest in living memory." Mara wondered if the atmospheric electrical discharges might be affecting the creature's unique biological structure. According to the ancient records, Void Reapers had been known to react strangely to certain energy wavelengths. She surreptitiously checked her disguised equipment, noting elevated readings that suggested some kind of internal energy fluctuation within the creature. As evening approached, the storm reached its peak. Rain lashed against the windows with near-solid force, and the wind's howl became a constant, maddening presence. Suddenly, a particularly violent thunderclap sounded directly overhead, so powerful that it rattled the dishes on their shelves and sent a shower of dust from the ceiling beams. The creature reacted instantly, leaping to its feet with a sound that was definitely not a normal cat's meow. The noise it produced sent a chill down Mara's spine, a harmonic resonance that reminded her of recordings she'd studied of deep space anomalies. "What's wrong, my lovely?" Leora asked, moving toward her pet with concern. Before she could reach him, another thunderclap shook the cottage, and this time, something changed. The creature's form seemed to blur around the edges, its coal-black fur rippling as though becoming momentarily insubstantial. For just an instant, Mara caught a glimpse of something beneath the feline appearance, a suggestion of geometries that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space, of limbs that followed impossible angles. Then the moment passed, and it was just a large, black cat again, albeit one now emitting a low, continuous growl that made the hair on Mara's arms stand on end. "I've never seen him this upset," Leora said, reaching out to stroke the creature's head. To Mara's horror, the old woman seemed completely unaware of the momentary transformation, or perhaps unable to perceive it. "Wait!" Mara called out, taking an involuntary step forward. "I don't think you should—" Her warning came too late. As Leora's hand made contact with the creature's fur, another deafening crash of thunder shook the cottage. This time, the transformation was more pronounced. The creature's form expanded slightly, its limbs elongating in ways that defied normal anatomy. Its eyes, already unusual, now blazed with internal light that cast eerie shadows across the room. Leora stumbled backward with a gasp, finally sensing that something was wrong. "Midnight? What's happening to you?" The creature made that strange harmonic sound again, but now Mara's trained ear could detect patterns within it, not language as humans understood it, but definitely communication. The biosignal detector in her pocket was vibrating wildly, confirming what her eyes were telling her. The Void Reaper's true nature was beginning to emerge. Time seemed to slow as Mara assessed her options. Protocol was clear. If the creature posed an imminent threat, she was authorized to use the emergency containment device hidden within her compass. But containment would likely kill the creature, and possibly Leora as well, due to the massive energy discharge. More importantly, something about this situation didn't match the historical records. If this was truly a Void Reaper revealing its nature, why hadn't it already consumed everything in sight? Why was it merely standing there, making that strange sound, its impossible eyes fixed on Leora with what looked almost like concern? Another crash of thunder, another ripple through the creature's form. It grew slightly larger again, now standing nearly as tall as Mara herself. Parts of its anatomy were clearly no longer feline, too many joints in the limbs, an asymmetrical distribution of mass, tendrils of darkness extending from its form like smoke given partial substance. Leora had backed against the wall, her face pale but remarkably free of terror. "What are you?" she whispered to her pet of 2 years. The creature took a step toward her, and Mara tensed, ready to activate the containment device despite the consequences. But the movement held no menace. Instead, the partially transformed being lowered its head, a head that now bore little resemblance to a cat's, and made a soft, trilling sound that somehow conveyed distress. It was afraid, Mara realized with astonishment, not angry, not hungry, not reverting to predatory instincts. The Void Reaper was afraid of the storm, and seeking reassurance from the human it had bonded with. "It's all right," Leora said suddenly, her voice steady despite the impossible situation. She straightened, moving away from the wall. "It's all right, my friend. I'm not afraid of you." Mara wanted to scream at the old woman to get back, to run, to save herself from a being that had once devoured entire civilizations. But the words died in her throat as she witnessed something unprecedented in all the recorded history of Void Reapers. The creature calmed at Leora's words. The tendrils of darkness retracted slightly, and though its form remained partially transformed, the sense of imminent danger receded. It made another sound, this one distinctly different, lower, almost musical. That's right, Leora continued, taking a cautious step forward. You won't hurt me. We're friends, you and I. Whatever you are, whatever you were, you're my midnight now. Against every protocol, against every instinct. Mara remained silent, watching the impossible interaction unfold. The old woman moved slowly toward the transformed creature, hand extended as one might approach a nervous animal. When her fingers made contact with the being's strange surface, not quite solid, not quite energy, there was no catastrophic reaction. Instead, the creature leaned into the touch, just as it had done in its more conventional feline form. There now, Leora murmured, stroking what approximated the creature's head. The storm can't hurt you. I won't let it. Mara stood transfixed, witnessing something that contradicted everything known about Void Reapers. They were supposed to be mindless consumers, cosmic forces of destruction without sentiment or attachment. Yet here was one, forming what could only be described as an emotional bond with a human being. As the storm continued to rage outside, Mara made a decision that would change the course of her career and potentially reshape galactic understanding of predatory species. Instead of reaching for the containment device, she reached for her recording equipment, disguised as an antique notebook and pencil. "Leora," she said softly, not wanting to disrupt the delicate moment. "I need to tell you something important about your friend." The night stretched long as Mara explained. Not everything, not the full truth about her mission or the Cosmic Council, but enough. She told Leora that Midnight was a member of an extremely rare species, one that scientists had long thought to be dangerous, but perhaps had misunderstood. She explained that the storm was somehow affecting the creature's physical form, causing it to partially revert to its true appearance. Leora listened with remarkable composure, continuing to comfort her transformed pet throughout the explanation. "I always knew he was special," she said when Mara had finished. "From the moment I found him, so small and yet with those ancient eyes, I knew he wasn't just some ordinary creature. He may be the most important discovery in my field in centuries." Mara admitted, "If a being like this can form bonds, can live peacefully among other species, it changes everything we thought we knew." The storm began to subside in the early hours of the morning. As the thunder grew more distant, the creature gradually returned to its feline form, though Mara noted that it maintained some subtle differences, an extra joint in its tail, a slight shimmer to its fur that suggested matter not entirely stable, those ever-shifting eyes that defied normal color spectrums. By dawn, Midnight was curled up beside Leora's chair, apparently exhausted by the transformation. The old woman stroked its fur with the same affection she had shown before, seemingly untroubled by the revelation that her beloved pet was something from beyond the stars. "What happens now?" Leora asked, as the first rays of sunlight broke through the dissipating clouds. It was the question Mara had been wrestling with all night. Protocol demanded she report immediately to the Council, but she knew what their response would be. The Void Reaper, even this apparently domesticated one, would be classified as a Class 1 threat and targeted for containment or elimination. Leora would be memory wiped, the village possibly quarantined. But Mara had seen something no other cosmic ecologist had ever witnessed, a Void Reaper capable of forming bonds, of restraint, of something that looked remarkably like affection. If she reported honestly, that discovery might be lost forever beneath bureaucratic fear. "I need to observe him longer," Mara said finally, "to understand how this is possible. With your permission, I'd like to stay a few more days." Leora's smile was knowing. "You're more than a simple scholar, aren't you, my dear?" Mara met the old woman's gaze. "Let's just say I have a particular interest in unique creatures and leave it at that. The less you know about my affiliations, the safer you'll be." "Very mysterious." Leora chuckled. "But you're welcome to stay as long as you need. Midnight seems to have taken a liking to you, and that's endorsement enough for me." Over the next 3 days, Mara conducted the most extraordinary field research of her career. With Leora's cooperation, she observed the creature's behavior, recorded its biological signatures, and even managed to collect a few shed fur samples for analysis. What she discovered challenged every established theory about Void Reapers. The creature's cellular structure was indeed identical to historical Void Reaper samples, but with one crucial difference. Its energy consumption pattern had fundamentally altered. Instead of the insatiable, all-consuming absorption that characterized the species, this individual had developed a sustainable metabolism. It still required more energy than a normal Earth feline of comparable size, but it obtained this energy through conventional means, eating the food Leora provided, supplemented by hunting small game in the surrounding forest. More fascinating still was its evident intelligence and emotional capacity. It recognized individual humans, responded to verbal and non-verbal cues, and displayed protective behavior toward Leora that went beyond instinct. When other villagers came to check on the old woman after the storm, the creature carefully assessed each visitor, remaining alert but non-threatening unless someone made sudden movements toward its human companion. On the evening of the 3rd day, as Mara sat with Leora beside the fire, the old woman asked a question that caught her off guard. "He's dangerous, isn't he? Not just unusual, but potentially deadly." Mara hesitated, then nodded slowly. "His species, they've been known to cause great harm, but he's different. He's adapted, changed in ways I wouldn't have believed possible if I hadn't seen it myself." Leora reached down to scratch behind the creature's ears, eliciting that rumbling purr that vibrated through the floorboards. "People can change, too. You know, even the most destructive ones. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to show a little kindness when they're at their most vulnerable." The simple wisdom struck Mara deeply. Was it possible that all the Void Reapers had needed was a different approach? Had countless civilizations been lost because no one had thought to try understanding rather than fighting? "Tomorrow I need to leave," Mara said, having made her decision. "I have to report my findings to my colleagues, but I promise you this. I will do everything in my power to ensure that you and Midnight are left in peace." Leora studied her face for a long moment. "I believe you will. You have honest eyes. Dr. Lin." Mara started at the use of her title. "How did you—" "I may be old, and I may live in a simple village, but I'm not a fool," Leora said with a twinkle in her eye. "You're no ordinary scholar, and your instruments are far too advanced to be from any nation I know of. I don't need to understand what you are to recognize that you mean well." The next morning, as Mara prepared to depart, she knelt before the creature one last time. Those impossible eyes met hers, and for a moment, she felt a connection that transcended species, a mutual recognition between two intelligent beings. "Take care of her," Mara whispered, nodding toward Leora, who was packing some food for Mara's journey. "And stay hidden during storms." The creature made a soft trilling sound and, to her astonishment, extended one paw to touch her hand, a deliberate gesture of communication that left Mara breathless with its implications. Her farewell to Leora was equally emotional. "I'll try to come back someday," she promised, "to check on both of you." "We'll be here," that old woman replied, embracing her warmly. "Unless Midnight decides we should move to more interesting pastures. He does seem to have a wanderer's spirit at times." As Mara hiked back through the forest to her concealed craft, her mind was already composing the report she would deliver to the council. Not the full truth, they weren't ready for that, but enough to ensure that this region of Solara would remain protected and unmonitored. She would describe a false alarm, a biosignature that proved to be a natural phenomenon unique to this planet's ecosystem. She would recommend minimal future surveillance, citing the need to preserve the developmental integrity of the pre-industrial civilization. And in her secured personal files, she would document everything she had learned about the transformed Void Reaper, building a case for a radical reassessment of the species, perhaps in time. When she had gathered more evidence and gained more influence within the council, she could reveal the full truth. As her craft lifted off, cloaking systems engaged to make it appear as nothing more than a peculiar cloud formation to any watching eyes below. Mara looked down at the receding landscape. Somewhere down there, the most feared predator in galactic history was probably curled up by a fire, purring as an old woman scratched behind its ears. The universe, Mara reflected, was far more complex and wonderful than even cosmic ecologists gave it credit for. 6 months later, Mara stood once again before the holographic display in the digital planetary library. Her official report had been accepted without question. The council had been relieved to dismiss the biosignature as a false alarm, eager to focus resources on more pressing matters. Solara had been removed from priority monitoring, classified as a system of minimal concern, but in her private research, funded by grants she had secured for studying theoretical predatory adaptations, Mara was building something revolutionary. On the display before her floated a new model of Void Reaper evolution, one that suggested the species had not vanished but transformed, reducing their size and energy consumption to sustainable levels, perhaps even developing symbiotic relationships with other life forms. "Fascinating theory, Dr. Lin," came a voice from behind her. Mara turned to see Director Kasim studying her work with an unreadable expression. "Though rather speculative, wouldn't you say? All breakthrough science begins as speculation." "Director?" She replied carefully. "The historical record shows that Void Reapers disappeared suddenly, without explanation. I'm simply proposing an alternative to the extinction theory." "Indeed," he gestured to the holographic model. "And your proposal that they might have developed non-predatory characteristics, formed symbiotic bonds with other species. That's quite a departure from established understanding." Mara met his gaze steadily. "Nature is full of surprises. Predators become protectors when the right conditions arise. Even the most fearsome creatures can change." For a long moment, Director Kasim said nothing, his eyes moving between Mara and the display. Then, to her surprise, a small smile touched his lips. "You know, Dr. Lin, there was a time, long before your career began, when I conducted field research myself, in the Andromeda sector, on a planet much like Solara." Mara's heart skipped a beat. "Oh? Yes, I encountered something there that didn't match our records, something that challenged everything I thought I knew." He reached out, manipulating the holographic display to zoom in on the cellular structure Mara had modeled. "Your theoretical adaptations are remarkably precise for pure speculation." The implication hung in the air between them. Mara waited, hardly daring to breathe. Your research grant has been approved for extension, Director Kasim said finally, turning away from the display. The Council believes your work on predatory adaptation could prove valuable. I've also authorized limited return expeditions to previously monitored systems, including Solara, for follow-up assessments. Of course. Relief and excitement flooded through Mara. Thank you, Director. I'll prepare immediately. As he turned to leave, Director Kasim paused. One more thing. Dr. Lin, if your theories prove correct, if certain species have indeed evolved beyond their predatory nature, it would represent a paradigm shift in cosmic ecology. Such a discovery would need to be introduced carefully, with substantial evidence and gradual education. I understand completely, Mara replied. After the director had gone, Mara returned to her work with renewed vigor. In a few weeks, she would return to Solara, to the small village between forest and hills, to an old woman and her impossible pet. She would bring better equipment, designed specifically for long-term observation and detailed analysis. She would document everything, build an irrefutable case, and perhaps, in time, the Galaxies would learn that even their most terrifying nightmares could transform into something new, that the apex predator that once terrorized stars now slept on an old woman's bed and ate from her hand. The universe, after all, was full of second chances. You just had to be brave enough to offer them.